In my last video, I talked about Trump's sense of victimhood and how central that is to his psyche and what makes him tick and what makes him do the things that he does. Now, in there, I explained in more detail, and I'll put the link in the description, the way in which Trump developed this sense of victimhood from early on in his life. His parents, and his father in particular, didn't pay much attention to him. In fact, would almost certainly ridicule him, push him down instead of building him up, and give him this sense of being a victim in his own skin, in his own family, in his own upbringing and life. That was then exacerbated later on when he became a property developer from Queens, trying to get in with the crowd of property developers from Manhattan who all looked down on him. And even when he managed to break into the Manhattan market, he was still looked down on by the original Manhattan property developers who looked at him as a sort of poor, not very capable, unsophisticated kid from Queens. So he continued to foster that sense of victimhood. And of course, that sense of being a victim was further exacerbated by the way his father treated him most of his young adult life, because he did work for his father. It was his father's business that he grew up in, his father's business that he was made to work in, day out. His father controlled his entire life. So again, that sense of victimhood was really fostered from the earliest days in his life. In this video, what I'm going to talk more about is the implications of that sense of victimhood that is fundamental and core to Trump and his characteristics. And the reason why I can say a lot more about it is because I got some fantastic feedback from the comments in that previous videos. So many examples of how actually that sense of victimhood makes a lot of sense, of the way in which actually explains a lot of things about Trump's behavior. So I'm going to go through some of those things, those ideas that I've had and others have had in the comments, to really expand on this idea that that sense of victimhood is core to Trump's being and core to understanding how he behaves and why he does the things he does. Now, of course, we know that that sense of victimhood is something that he's now merged with the country. As he sees himself as the country, in many senses, he believes that the country has been a victim from all other countries around the world. America is constantly being ripped off. They're taking us for a ride. That's why he's having a go at NATO countries for not paying more for their defense. He feels like America is being ripped off there, when actually America is getting a very good deal. It has an enormous amount of power and influence because of that military dominance that it has, but he doesn't see it that way. He sees it as America being ripped off. The fact that there's a trade imbalance where other countries are selling more into America than America is selling outwards is just part of the market cycle. It's how things work. But he sees it as America being ripped off. And he even, as I've mentioned in another previous video, defined them as tariffs. But they're not tariffs. It's just a trade imbalance. There aren't these massive tariffs that other countries had imposed on America. So what it was imposing back in return weren't retaliatory tariffs. They were actually an act of aggression from America, economic aggression. But it came about because of Trump's sense of grievance, Trump's sense of victimhood, believing that America is a victim of other countries taking advantage of it. So that sense of victimhood goes really deep, and not just applying to Trump himself and how he sees himself, but how he now sees America, with which he has fused his identity. And of course, this idea that America is a victim nation has actually been in him for a long time. You know, back in the 80s, one of the first ads that he ran, and the New York Times actually paid for ads to make political points. And one of the first things that he stated in one of these ads is the way in which Japan is ripping off America, that we're constantly being ripped off by Japan. Those people are taking advantage of us. We shouldn't fall prey and become a victim to their expansion. Of course, we know what happened in the end. America soared and Japan faltered. But that's not how he saw it at the time. He thought America was being taken advantage of. So again, that sense of victimhood being fundamental to how he sees the world. Now, what I mentioned in the previous video is the way in which his attitude to Ukraine, to Zelenskyy and a number of other people is also a consequence of this. You see, his sense of victimhood is essentially artificial. It's based on an echo of the past. He's not a victim anymore. Yes, he may have been in his early years in some respects, but he certainly isn't a victim anymore. He's the most powerful man on earth. He's a billionaire. He's making more money hand over fist every day through his presidency. Of course, he isn't a victim anymore, but he believes he is. And so the greatest threat to him is a real victim. When he comes across a real victim, that is a threat to him, because if he feels empathy for a real victim, if he connects to a real victim, if he becomes aware of their actual victimhood, what that will immediately do is diminish his own sense of victimhood. He will immediately put it into context and realize how actually he's not a victim at all. Actually, he's pretty lucky. And then that whole dimension of his identity will start to evaporate. And that's why he can never have it. That's why he can never face other victims. That's why they're a threat to him. And that's why he's been so derogatory and disdainful towards Ukraine and towards Zelenskyy. If you remember, when he had that Oval Office bust up with Zelenskyy, it happened because Zelenskyy was showing him pictures of soldiers and other people in Ukraine who'd gone through horrific injuries and experiences. And it was those sharing of trauma that started to bubble Trump up, started to boil his skin underneath, because again, it was showing victims to him, which he couldn't stand.
1 minute, just you to understand in what circumstances, in what situation they are, and what the attitude of Russia to our prisoners. That guys, just you before and after. And you see before and after, just you to understand. Now thousands of such guys, ladies and men, there, and that, so they don't eat, they beat them, and they, they do a lot of bad things. So out of, even during the war, there are rules. Everybody knows there are rules during the war. So these guys, they don't have any rules. You see that 50, 60 kilograms left, and a lot of such things. And I didn't want to show you what the changes with images of children, because I will just share with you. And I mean, it's looking tragic. And you see it.
Yeah.
This is pastor, by the way. They stolen pastors because it's not Russian church. They stolen pastors and moved pastors to the prison. We, at the end of last year, we brought 3 pastors, and we could exchange them. And this is pastor, you see.
Yeah.
And we've seen him behave this way towards all kinds of victims everywhere, including in the States. During the California wildfires, he was completely disinterested. He was indifferent to their plight. And he's done that in natural disaster after natural disaster. Any engagement from him seems to be a chore. Most of the time, he starts to look down on people who have been through difficult situations through no fault of their own. And of course, that's what he even thinks of the military. If you remember, General Kelly, his former chief of staff, when he stood at a military cemetery with Trump, wrote in his own book that Trump said he doesn't understand it. Why would they do this? He referred to them as suckers and losers. He's referring to people who gave their lives for their country in the armed forces. A president of the United States actually calling his own military suckers. And again, they were real victims, but he doesn't want to see that. He can't see them. They're a threat to him. Army vets, of course. Generally, US administrations revere Army veterans. There's a great deal of respect throughout America for Army veterans, and the VA, the Veterans Association, is well funded for that reason. Trump was trying to take their funding away. Through DOGE, they were showing their complete indifference to the plight of military veterans. And of course, one of the most famous veterans of all, John McCain, somebody who was respected throughout the Republican Party, in all wings of the party, because of his service. The only and first person to ever denigrate him was Donald Trump. What did he say? I prefer people who weren't captured. He described McCain as a loser. Again, McCain had been a real victim of capture and torture in his life, and Trump couldn't stand that, because if you compare that victimhood to his own victimhood looks like a nothing. And that would suddenly threaten that identity that he has of being a victim. As I mentioned in my previous video, that sense of victimhood is what connects him with his followers. But they are genuine victims. They have had real economic hardship in their life, unlike Trump. But he connects to them because he feels, in many respects, like they do, although his is a false feeling, an artificial one, and that's why he's threatened by a real victim. There are plenty more examples like this, like the Palestinians, for example. He doesn't just ignore the Palestinians, he actively hates them. He looks down on them. It's almost a slur for him, the term Palestinian. He doesn't want to ignore them, he wants to destroy them. So what does this mean for the future? Unfortunately, not good things. It means that Trump is a bit like a steamroller rolling over insects and ants. A steamroller that is unable to see its victims because he cannot see his own victims. Just look at what's happened with the tariff policy and the realization that prices will go up. What did he say? He said that, well, you might not be able to get $33 for Christmas, you might just have one instead. And of course, his own voters are people whose children might only get $1, but they might not even get that now because of what Trump is doing by raising prices through tariffs. But he will not see that. He will not connect to the victims of his own policies. He won't allow himself to. And you see, even the metaphor I just gave of a steamroller rolling over insects is not powerful enough to describe the problem here, because Trump actually, in some senses, rejoices in the attacks of others. When other people wail and scream and complain to him about what he's doing, he rejoices in that. Why? Because this unconscious victimhood that he has is actually fed by the attacks of others. So he rejoices in that sense of victimhood. In a way, it's a kind of unconscious rejoicing because he wouldn't admit to it or believe himself consciously to be a victim, but he unconsciously stays in that place. And so when he's attacked by the media, by opponents, by the public, it fuels that sense of self that he has. He identifies with being a victim deep down inside. And so he revels deep down inside in this criticism, in this ire that he evokes all around him. So it's not just that this bulldozer is oblivious to the destruction it's causing upon the insect world on the road, it's going out of his way to find more and more insects, almost like it's feeding off them. Now, Nixon actually had something a little bit similar to this. He also had a victim sense within him. If you remember, he talked about how the media loved to kick Nixon around. He also thrived on this sense of being a victim to some degree. It's what got him elected in the first place. But it was nothing like Trump's level. Trump is a different league. And the reason is, again, we go back to his childhood. It's not just the way in which he was made a victim by his aggressive, ruthless, oppressive, traumatizing father, and then the later experience he had amongst the Manhattan set. It's also about the fact that he was schooled in how to turn people into victims, almost as a sport, because that's what his father did to his elder brother, Fred. As many of you will know, Fred Trump was Donald Trump's older brother, and his father bullied him incessantly, literally to death. This is a man who trained to become an airline pilot, something that would make any parent proud. But Daddy Trump couldn't stop writing to his son, Fred Trump, and telling him how embarrassed he was, how ashamed he was of his son who was a glorified bus driver instead of a master of the universe like him. He poured scorn on his son on a daily basis. And his poor young daughter, Mary Trump, who's written earnestly and heartbreakingly about this, talks about how it broke her father, how he resorted to drinking, eventually lost his job, and eventually drunk himself to death. Trump Sr. made Fred Trump into the biggest victim of all, and what could Donald Trump do at that point? Well, he did the thing he thought he needed to do to survive, which was to trample on the victim and join in the victimization with his father. So he too turned against his brother Fred, and that way was schooled into how to create victims. So you see, it's at a deeper level altogether with Donald Trump. There are many layers and episodes in his life that build this sense of victimhood in him, not just maintaining it in himself, but pushing it out there onto others. It's like the victim virus, if you like. He feels it in himself and he creates it in other people around him. He feels like he's a victim and he makes other people all around him feel like victims too. That applies to friends and foe alike. All of the people in his inner circle are going to feel like victims more and more every day. As I stand here, Marco Rubio is getting almost more jobs every day. But I don't think he feels any happier or more powerful as a result. He probably feels more and more like a victim every day. It happens to all of them. They develop this bunker mentality because the world is against them. And who can blame them for what they're doing? So everywhere Trump infects everyone with this sense of being a victim. For him, it's imagined and it's historical. But for other people, it's real. The victim virus that is at the core of Donald Trump and what he's doing to the world, wreaking havoc in its path. Thank you for watching my video. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm also interested in philosophy and public policy and politics. I aim to make a number of videos about these subjects and particularly the intersection between them. If you're able to like and subscribe to this channel, then it'll really help, and also put in some comments whenever you can. That'll really help the algorithm. It'll really help promote this channel to other people. Now, beyond that, we are all, unfortunately, at the behest of a very small number of people who seem to run everything these days. And we are all at the whim of a tech oligarch who could decide tomorrow to end a channel like this because it's not in their favor. And because of that, I've set up a kind of email newsletter, which you can subscribe to. At the top of the channel, you'll see a web address. Please go there and subscribe to my newsletter. That way you can stay in touch with the videos I'm making. At least we can keep the content flowing. So I hope you can do that. And I hope we can keep talking and also gain clarity, not just about what's happening right now, but how we can get through this, how we can improve things to make a better tomorrow together. Thank you.